Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we're going to look at one of Elvis's first report cards, not the very first one, but an early one, and we're going to meet his forgotten third grade teacher. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate having you here. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Hi, Angie. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate having you here, too. But before we get to today's report card, we've got to finish the story that we started yesterday. And when we left off, Vernon was still in prison, Parchman Prison in Mississippi. Gladys had gathered a whole lot of signatures on a petition, and Orville Bean had written a letter to the governor. So the petition and the letter went to the governor. This was in late December. That's when Orville's letter went. I'm assuming the petition was somewhere around the same time. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Emma. I appreciate having you guys here. It makes the stream so much better when we've got a lot of participants. So the governor has now received the letter. He's received the petition. He's looking them over. And we know that at some point between the time Vernon got thrown in jail, because we know he was there for 6 months, because there's no records to indicate that he was let out. Now, I have been thinking about that because we know that there was a record that his father had guaranteed the bond for Travis Smith, who was Gladys's brother. And we theorized yesterday maybe Vernon had agreed to that, or maybe that was the best thing for the family, and there just wasn't money to get Vernon out at that time. But I've also been thinking maybe Vernon did get out, and we just don't have the record of it, and everyone just agrees that he was in because there's no record, there's no document. And what we're doing here is looking at documents, so I'm not sure that Vernon really was in prison or in jail for those 6 months. Maybe he got out like the other two, and then he came back for his trial in May. I don't know for sure. If anybody does know for sure and they can find anything on it, definitely let me know. I definitely want to take a look at that. But wanted to throw that possibility out there because we had looked at that yesterday. But even if we assume that Vernon got out, he went to prison in May after the trial, and he was there until they let him out on February 6th, 1939. So he was in there more than 6 months, right? Like 8 months. And at some point during that period, Gladys left the birthplace and took Elvis somewhere else. And there's different opinions on where they went. And I just want to read you a few quotes from various sources that indicate where they think they went. One is Ernest Jorgensen. And if you're a big Elvis fan, I'm sure you know Ernest. He's written a lot of stuff. A very well-respected guy within the community. Knows what he's talking about most times. But again, this is a murky period. And what we're doing is trying to find actual records to substantiate stuff. But where those records are completely missing, sometimes we got to go to these next sources. This quote is, Gladys is unable to maintain the repayment schedule on their home, causing the family to lose the house. And she and Elvis are forced to move in with relatives. So again, Gladys is unable to maintain the repayment schedule on their home, causing the family to lose this house, and she and Elvis are forced to move in with relatives. Now, as we know, even though I haven't really shown you guys the proof yet, they didn't owe any money on the house to Orville. They were probably at most paying rent. But the essential thought, Gladys was unable to make the payments. Well, that is true. She probably would have been completely unable to make payments. Now, did they move in with relatives? Well, yeah, most likely. That is exactly what happened. And so I had theorized yesterday that December seemed very late for this to have happened. Although if Vernon did not serve the 6 months in jail and he went to prison in May, it's possible Gladys kept everything together until October, started missing payments October, November, and by December, Orville may have been very anxious to get her to move along, or maybe she'd missed a few more payments than that. That seems more reasonable if we went with my theory, which is only a theory. So if you guys have theories, feel free to throw them out there. On this channel, no one has to be qualified to talk about Elvis. No one has to have an education at Elvis to have their opinion about Elvis. They can throw it out there and we can talk about it. We can talk about why it might be right and why it might be wrong. But I know that there are other channels right now that are feeling like they need to qualify people as to whether those fans are able to talk about Elvis, which is ridiculous because that particular person is a journalist. That is what their profession is. And a journalist, if we were to pull 10 news stories today, I'm sure that we could find 100 lies within those 10 news stories. And if you've been following my other stream about the mystery of 1977, where we've looked at a lot of news stories, you would know there's not a lot of truth in many of these news stories. There's a lot more lies in most of them, even the ones that aren't the tabloids. So to me, a degree in journalism might not be a qualification to talk about Elvis, although I don't want to insult any journalist out there. We get a lot of our information from journalists, and this particular person has just said this that somewhat irritated me, that other people who are not qualified by their standards should not be allowed to talk about Elvis. On this channel, everybody's allowed to talk about Elvis. Everybody's allowed to give their opinion. The only rule I have is that there cannot be any vulgarity, no profanity, because this is a clean channel that is family friendly. Now back to the story. Peter Goralnik, who is another well-respected writer, he stated that during the brief time Vernon was in prison, Gladys lost the house and moved in briefly with her in-laws next door. So he's saying that they moved into the big house, that they left the small house and they moved into the big house. They lived with Minnie Mae and Jesse D. Presley and Nash Presley. Possibly Delta. I think Delta was gone and married, though. So, yeah, very possible. And I believe that did happen. I believe that was the first place she went. And then Elaine Dundee, who wrote a book before either of these two guys. She's the very first one into the field, really. She comes in after Albert Goldman has trashed Elvis, and the academic thought about Elvis at that moment is that he is a terrible person, and Elaine really comes in and redeems Elvis from that within the academic community, and she makes it you can be proud to research Elvis because of the research and care that Elaine Dundee did for her book, and did put out there with her publication. But not everything she said was absolutely correct. She was blazing a new trail. And what her quote is these are hard times for mother and son. Understandably, in view of Jesse Presley's attitude towards his son, Gladys had grown more and more uncomfortable living next door to her father-in-law. And at some point during Vernon's prison sentence, Gladys moved out and stayed with her first cousin, Frank Richards. So that did also happen. She did move in with Frank Richards. So what I believe happened is she moved over to the big house, couldn't stay there forever, even if she wanted to. She knew that you can't put this kind of burden on any one member of the family. And I'm sure she felt more comfortable with a member of her own family rather than the married members of the family. You know, she had married into the Presleys. She really was a Smith. I don't believe this is the first time that Frank had assisted her. And she was living with Frank when Vernon was released from prison, February 6, 1939. The governor did agree to pardon him, but he did have conditions of continued good behavior. And the leniency of this result was a, quote, petition of the citizens of Lee County, and on the letter from Mr. O.S. Bean, the party on whom the checks were forged, end quote. So that was from a document that was signed by the governor stating that it was the petition and it was the letter from Orville Bean that changed his mind. And he let Vernon out of prison. Now, what I don't know is if they let out Travis or Luther, at least not at this point from these sources. So I'm just looking over in the comments and I see that Terry's got a new video out there and about Paradise Hawaiian Style. I did see the thumbnail for that, but I haven't watched it yet. But everybody check out Terry's channel, and everybody check out Emma's channel, Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis. She's got a new one out there too. So that's Elvis History and Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis. Carolyn saying that she's wondering who I'm talking about, and that the person's a little bit unhinged. That's unreal. Angie's laughing about it. And so everybody knows, you know, who we're sallying forth to talk about, right? So, so to finish off this story, Vernon's out of prison. He lives with Frank and Leona Richards, who are the cousins of Gladys, for a little while, along with Gladys and Elvis. And then they find another place and they move on. And they live in several places in Tupelo. And one day I might take you guys on a Tupelo tour and I'll show you all the different places that they lived. It's very difficult to figure out where all these are, and they're not listed in order in any book or anything. So in 1940, Vernon was granted an indefinite suspension of his sentence. So he still had something that was carrying over him, even though he had been released until 1940, and then it was all gone. And later on, he buys a house from Orville Bean on Berry Street in East Tupelo. And we're going to talk about that house because I'm pretty sure I got the contract for it. So we're going to take a look at that contract. And that story involves Vernon's good friend, Aaron Kennedy. And Aaron is the man for whom Elvis is named. His middle name, Aaron, is for this friend, Aaron Kennedy. Because Vernon and Aaron were friends before Elvis was born. Back when he and Gladys were newlyweds. And the very final part of this story, let me bring up some pictures to go with this. So this first picture that I've got to show you, well, yeah, let's go ahead and go here. This first picture I got to show you, this is the birthplace, but this picture was taken sometime in the 1940s. At least that's what the captions say. I think it could have been slightly later than that, maybe the 50s. If you notice, there are electric wires running to it. So electricity has been run to the house by this point. So it was built around late 34, and probably by 45, it would have had these. So this is probably 45 or later. But again, I don't know exactly when electricity was run to the house. Maybe it was the day Gladys left. I don't really know. And I see that in the comments, Emma saying that she's gotten her first negative comment. Yeah, I've gotten some on here too. And I find that the best way to deal with the negative comments is to treat them very kindly. Just say something very kind back to them. They usually don't respond. But I've turned a few around and they're probably watching right now. So I don't find it productive to engage with anybody that's negative in any way, really. Other than to just let them know that Their opinion's welcome here, and they can put it out there if they want it, as long as there's no vulgarity or profanity. And so the important thing about this picture, though, other than the electricity that's run to the house, is if you look to the right, you can see another house. Well, is there another house next to the birthplace? Well, at this point in time, there was. And a lot of people believe that what we're looking at right there is the big house. That's the house that JD and Minnie Mae and Nash and Vernon grew up in, that Vester grew up in, that Delta grew up in. That's it right there. The big house. Best picture I think I've ever seen of it, actually, if that's it. It's definitely right next to the birthplace. That corresponds to where Annie says it was. It's a little closer than I would have thought, but maybe not. If you've been there, it kind of is in the right place there. And you can see the hill, right? You can see that this picture is being taken up a hill at the house. So it's the house on the hill. So I thought you guys would find that picture extremely interesting. This is a picture of Oletta Grimes. She was Elvis's 5th grade teacher. I believe that she's the one who picked him to be in the singing contest that was at the fairgrounds, that he got like the not first place. And there's a big controversy about which place he did get and who got the first place, but he won like some tickets to some of the fairground rides or something and was very happy. And one of his very first performances in front of a live audience, she had recognized something in him. She is the daughter of Orville Bean. So later on, when Elvis donates the money to purchase the land to turn the birthplace into a park with a pool for the kids, she's the one who owns the land, and she sells the land. She is touched by Elvis's gesture and sells the land so that it can be made into this park for the local community, which it eventually is, but I don't think the pool's ever put in, and that it eventually becomes this Elvis birthplace that you know to love today. So I thought you guys might be interested in that picture and how Orville Bean ties into Oletta Grimes, who inherited all of his property when he passed away. And the very, very last part of this story is that Orville Stone Bean, passed away on February 16th, 1958. So 4 years after Elvis came to fame, and 2 years after Elvis, not even really 2 years, because Elvis came to national prominence in early 1956, would have been a household name in 1957. So Orville would have lived long enough to know that Elvis was a household name when he passed away on February 16th, 1958. All right, now this is also a picture of the birthplace. And again, you can see the house next to it, which would be the big house. And there's somebody sitting up here, and we could pretend that maybe they're one of the Presleys. They're not, but we could pretend that maybe they were. And this would have been something like it would have looked like when the Presleys lived there. And the friends were over, and they were all sitting out on the porch, and maybe Vester was plucking the guitar, and little Elvis would have been running around. Now you can see that the house is up on like blocks, and you can get under the house, and you can get under the other house too. So those are play areas. You know, the kids would go down there and play because it was cool. It was hidden from the sun. And you go down there and you make mud pies, which Elvis got in trouble for a lot, or they would take like household debris, like old wooden spools from thread, or snuff packages that were used, And they would turn them into toys, like little toy cars, or, it's a lot of imagination, like playing with blocks when you're a kid. So this is a picture of Elvis in 1943. But before we look at this picture, let's look at this picture. This is a picture probably from early 1942. I think this would have been probably right around his 7th birthday. Although it might have been earlier and he was around 6. So between this picture and the report card that we're going to see, Elvis and Gladys and Vernon and Annie and Sales and their kids all went to the coast because it's World War II, and they were able to get jobs doing something with the coast, with the Defense Department building some kind of ships or something down there. And I don't remember the details off the top of my head, but they were there, and they had just moved back like during that summer because Annie couldn't stand it there, and she was very pregnant and did not want to give birth there. And Gladys didn't want to stay there without Annie. So they all moved back to Tupelo, and that's what allowed Elvis to go to the 3rd grade in Tupelo. And this is what he would have looked like probably before they left. And Emma's saying that she used to make mud pies too. And Carolyn made mud pies. And hello, Memphis Flash Rishi. Thanks for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So let's go back to the pictures, the other pictures. So this is a picture of Elvis, I believe, roughly a year later from the picture that we just saw. He's probably 8 years old here. This would be probably just before school starts or just after school started for the 3rd grade. This would be 1943, probably like August, September, something like that, because he's wearing long pants, right? And he's got the suspenders on, and he's got the nice shirt. Now, it could just be a Sunday. Maybe that's what's going on. He's got his hair combed nice. Or it could have been a day they're all going to school to get pictures taken or something. But somebody's got a camera, and they're taking pictures, which is unusual to start with. Some people will tell you that we're going to look at 3 of these pictures, and some people are going to tell you that the building behind them is the school, which it is not. That is not the school building. I think that's the big house. Could be the birthplace, but I think it's the big house. And they're in the Presley yard. Next to him, it's hard to see, but there's a red wagon, and the wheels are turned slightly, but the wagon's facing you straight on. But if you really look at it, you can see that it's a wagon. I think he just got that for he's gotten that at some point for something. I'm not sure why. And you might say, well, then that would put this around his birthday. And his hair's nice and he's got the clothes. Well, maybe it is. Maybe this is January of 1939. Or 1944. But I believe it's either 43 or 44 during 3rd grade. And that's because everyone misidentifies it as a 3rd grade picture at the school. And he looks about the right age. And it's most likely in Tupelo, which means that he's back from that trip that they took, that stay that they took for that work. This is the document that we're looking at today. This is his report card from that 3rd grade that covers 1943 and 1944. So it would have been like August or September of 1943 through like May, June 1944, probably very early June. And so when he gets this report card, and I don't believe there's an actual date anywhere on the report card, but when he gets it for the final time, to take home to his parents. Elvis is 9 years old, and it's a few days before D-Day in World War II, because D-Day was early June 1944. So that's when Elvis graduated from the 3rd grade. Now, on this document, it says 1944 Pupils Report Card. And you may ask, how can we believe that this is a real report card? Well, you can purchase a reproduction of this report card that is licensed by EPE. So if EPE is licensing it, I'm going to say it's real. Doesn't mean it's real, because they'll sell you one of them driver's license too, right, at the gift shop. So maybe it's faux, maybe it's not real, I don't know, but they sell it as a real thing, that it's a reproduction of a real document. So you have to make your own decision about who EPE is telling the truth to, and if EPE is telling a fib. So other things information that we're able to glean from this document. He's going to the East Tupelo School. George W. Davis is the county superintendent. And I believe George owned a really nice house that is now in the historical register in Tupelo that has a very long history. Just found that out today. Maybe I'll share that in the future video. But he would have been the county superintendent. Elvis Presley was the pupil, grade 3, session 1943 through 44. His teacher's name, Mrs. Harvey Wilson. And she has a signature of J. Wilson. So we don't know what her first name is. She's married to a guy named Harvey. And she promotes Elvis to the 4th grade. So she plays a significant role in Elvis's life, just like all of our teachers did. She's taught him the 3rd grade, and she's promoted him. And the only thing we know about her, and I've tried to look up some more stuff, so if you know anything about Mrs. Harvey Wilson, please let me know so that we can get it recorded for the future. But all we really know is she was married to a guy named Harvey, and her first initial is J. So today, I'm speaking her name on this video, and I put it onto the title and into the thumbnail so that everyone can remember Mrs. Harvey Wilson, who taught Elvis 3rd grade and has basically disappeared from history. Her name is being sold today by EPE and has been visible for decades, yet nobody knows who she is. But now all of us do, and all of us will remember. I see Richie saying that the pics he can't see anything on them. Well, not a problem, Richie, because you can go find this online and you can blow it up as big as you want, or you could purchase your very own from EPE. I won't make a dime off that, but EPE will. And Carolyn's agreeing it's hard to see the stuff on the phone. It probably is very difficult on the phone. So I do have a lot of people that watch on TV. So if you guys like to watch on TV, but it's harder to comment, keep your phone with you, and then you can comment from the phone as you watch the video. That is my suggestion. But again, anybody who wants to, for all the documents that I show you, they're all out there. You just got to go Google them. They'll pop right up. This one for sure, because they want to sell it to you. Let's go forward. So if we go over to the others, well, right below where Mrs. Harvey Wilson has signed, there is an advertisement, and it says Glasgow's Drugstore. Across the street from Hotel Tupelo, we make our own ice cream. Special care given to doctor's prescriptions. Tupelo, Mississippi. Phones 43 and 44. So the first thing I find interesting about that is their phones are only 2 digits long, 43 and 44. Like, we got a lot of digits for a phone number today if you actually have to punch it in. But back then, you had two, 43 and 44 to get hold of the drugstore. They had two lines. They also made their own ice cream. And the other thing to pull out of this is that the local community was very involved in the schools. They were funding the schools. They were sharing in the cost of the education. And the parents who would receive these report cards, they were paying taxes for that education. So they immediately saw that these companies were partners in the community, that they wanted to support their children. And for a lot of them, their children's education was the first education anyone in the family had ever gotten. Everybody else had been like Vernon, made it to year 5, and then they'd had to drop out. So these guys were going all the way through high school. And that meant a lot to these parents. So if you had your name on this report card, well, that meant you were helping to make that happen. And these communities were tight. So when you see later on, when we see in the late 50s and throughout the 60s, as the inner city schools begin to fall apart, they don't have this kind of community support. They don't have these local companies that are supporting them like this. This is kind of a small town thing, and it's what keeps their educational system together. So in the back cover, we see the People's Bank and Trust Company, Tupelo, Mississippi, member Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Ooh, that was a big deal right then, because we just got out, we're in the middle of the Depression. The crash had occurred October 29, 1929. So everybody here remembered, who saw this report card, they all remembered the crash. And a lot of them lost money in the banks because they were not federally insured back then. But now the government, in order to keep the banks liquid and open, had stated that if you lose less than like $100,000, they would cover it. Now, would they really cover it? Would you really get it? People believed it, and people did get paid out, and it's still around today. So we still see the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Well, hi, Kristen. Thank you so much for joining from Those Elvis Girls. And everybody be sure to visit Those Elvis Girls and check out their videos. They do some of the most amazing interviews I've ever seen. But thank you so much for coming, Kristen. I really appreciate it. And Colleen, thank you for being here. I always appreciate it when you're here too. And I thank everybody for having a nice community over here in the chat. I see a lot of chatting and commenting going on. Just chit-chatting between each other, and I really appreciate that you have that community, because that's what I want to have happen here. Everybody to have a place that they can come and make their statements and give their opinions and feel like part of a family, just like Elvis's family. So let's look at Gravelly Lumber Company, Tupelo, Mississippi. If it's building material, we have it. That was their quote. Perry's K&K Cleaners, phone 311. So this guy's got a 3-digit phone number. Apparently, they got their phones after the drugstores. They're newcomers to the Tupelo scene because they got a 3-digit phone number. And theirs is, let our schools keep your minds clean. Let our experts keep your clothes clean. We do what others leave undone. And then we got the R.W. Reed Company, the store of greater values, featuring wearing apparel of known make, style, and value. Everything to wear for schoolgirls and boys. Phone 71. So they got a higher phone number than the drugstore, but it's still only 2 digits, so they've been around maybe longer than these cleaners, or at least they had their phone longer. And they're selling stuff for the school kids, and it's of known make. Now, the stuff that is coming out of the Tupelo garment factory, it's also of known make, because it's being sold in like the Sears catalogs and stuff. So it's a name brand. And our last one on this page is Freeman Furniture Company. You furnish the bride, we furnish the home. which that's a pretty fun little one too. You furnish the bride, we furnish the home. So obviously they're advertising to the men. Let's take a look at our next image. So you can find this image online, and a lot of people will tell you that it is at the schoolhouse and it's the school kids, his fellow school chums. Some of these might be classmates of Elvis, but I believe, again, this was taken at either his house or the big house. It's the same day. He's wearing the same clothes. Now, Elvis didn't have a lot of clothes, so you could say, well, this is just another day, but his hair is the same. He's wearing the clothes the same. This has got to be the same day. And there's a camera. I mean, how many days does a camera show up that they get to take the pictures? So they've gathered this group of kids to take pictures. And my belief is these kids are the following people. There's Elvis. There's Yvonne Ritchie. There's Guy Harris. There's James Farrar. The girl in the middle is Laverne Clayton. I believe the girl next to her is Bobby Spencer, and the little kid in the front is Odell Clark. And any of you that have ever read any stuff about Elvis when he was little, those names all pop up. And you can find out on YouTube, like, interviews with these people as much, much older people. Especially, I believe, Guy Harris is out there and Odell Clark. Now, I don't know that that's these people in this picture. That was from another place that had identified these people in the picture. It sounds reasonable to me off the top of my head. I believe that was the names of the people that were around him at this time. But I don't believe these are his classmates, at least not all of them, and because they all look much younger than him. And I don't believe it's at the school. So let's take a look at the next image. All right, this is the inside of the report card. This is how well Elvis did, his grades. So there's a key here, and it tells you that E equals excellent, S equals satisfactory, and U equals unsatisfactory. So if we do a quick scan, we can see that there are no U's. So Elvis was at least satisfactory in everything. And so we'll just run through the subjects real quick, and I will give you his final overall grade in each subject. Again, if you want to, you can go find this online, and you can take a much closer look at each grade for each. He had three little three little pieces of each semester, and then those 2 semesters would have added up to an overall grade. His grade for English was E-, excellent minus. Reading was excellent. Writing was excellent minus. Spelling was excellent. Health was excellent. Arithmetic, excellent minus. So he's right up there at, like, I would say that's got to be an A-, A- for most things. You know, maybe those E- are slipping into the B's as we think of them, but pretty good. He's pretty good up there. He's got a few S+ scattered throughout the smaller periods, but he's brought everything up to at least some form of an E by the end of the year. So pretty good year. For home economics, he's got 2 checks. For mathematics, he's got 5 checks. For geography, he's got 2. For civics, he's got 5 checks. For economics, he's got 1 check. I have no idea how many checks you're supposed to have or what that meant. Nothing tells you, but he has them. Those are his checks. And he's got a whole bunch of checks on unnamed stuff. Again, no idea what that meant, but he got them. For school spirit, he ended up with an excellent, with attitude and excellent, conduct and excellent, and days absent in total, 12. So we had a lot of days absent for 2 semesters. But I don't think that was probably unusual for the time period. If you got sick, you probably stayed home. And a lot of them probably had stay-at-home moms, so it probably wasn't a problem. You were still getting parental supervision. I don't think it was as big a deal for them back then. You've gone too long, they definitely come looking for you. But these teachers knew these parents. These teachers were part of the community. It wasn't that huge community, so it's a little different than probably a lot of schools that we've been to. And Emma's saying that this is so special to be able to see these. Thank you so much, Emma. I appreciate that comment. And Roy Marksberry, thank you so much for coming, Roy. I think you're new here. I haven't seen your name before. And Roy saying that he got an F in music. Well, they didn't have any music in this year, so he didn't get an F this year in music. Although I know what you're talking about, and I believe that's later in his high school career, but not at this point. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you being here. Now let's take a look at what else this says. To the parents or guardian, cooperation. Your signature indicates you have examined the report. It does not necessarily signify your approval or disapproval. If the pupil's work is not satisfactory, you should confer with the teacher in order that through close cooperation of home and school, better results may be obtained. Regular attendance. Pupils should not be absent except for the most imperative reasons. Home study. Lack of study is the most common cause of academic failure. If home assignments are made, your child should have a regular time for study in a quiet room. And then the form is signed where it says signature of parent or guardian, Vernon Presley. And I see that he's only signed once. So I don't know if that means he didn't get it every time or they only sent it home once or, yeah, I don't know. But I do notice that he's only signed once. Or maybe he got lost and he got a new one every time. Or maybe on this final one, she made a copy and sent it. Although it looks like it was being filled out the whole time. But I'm not sure. I really don't know. And so I did find a little piece about Mrs. Wilson that I'm not sure where they sourced this from, but it said that she was a very kind and supportive teacher as the children transitioned from print writing to cursive writing, and that she understood that boys were often behind the girls in developing these skills. So girls had better handwriting in general in the third grade, at least Mrs. Wilson felt so, than what boys did. And she saw that as, a special obstacle that the boys had, and she helped them and was supportive with it. And that during this third grade, this was where Elvis, he began to discover art and music, even though they're not in the curriculum, because now he's got access to, which he's always had, but he's old enough to begin to appreciate his access to library materials and school materials. And he begins to read for pleasure. So he knew how to read before this, because obviously he's doing very well in reading. But he learned to read for himself, for his own pleasure in learning, just as something that he enjoyed doing here in the third grade. This is really where it began. And it really centered at this point in time around comic books. And we've all heard that he loved comic books. And his cousin Harold has a quote about how he would go over to Elvis's house and he loved to read the comic books with Elvis. And Elvis would let him borrow them because he was one of the only people that would treat them with respect and bring them back untattered. And that Elvis had an entire shelf in his room and that he had his comics on there. And I'm sure we've all heard the famous story that he once went out and handed away all his comics, although I'm sure he recollected more. Because he read comics probably into high school because there's some evidence of that. Um, and so a lot of his early reading, was to be able to read the words in these comics better, to understand what was going on, and to read the stories that were behind the comic story. So comics in these days would reference all kinds of Western classical education stuff, like mythology, like Greek mythology, or different great plots out of different pieces of literature. And they would basically graft those plots onto the characters of the comic books. But that's how they would quickly write a lot of this comic stuff. And so one way that I've been thinking about taking this channel is I could begin to take a lot of those public domain comics, which are the very ones that Elvis would have had access to and read. Like, you all are aware of Captain Marvel Jr., but he would have also read Captain Marvel. And there was a whole slew of comics during that period. And he wouldn't have been contained to any one comic. He would have read them all, especially the action-adventure ones. And what I'm thinking about doing is presenting those in a live stream where I will read through them, and we will talk about what maybe Elvis would have pulled from this comic if he had read it. The caveat is that I don't know that Elvis read these comics, but they would have been available at the time. They would have been the ones on the newsstand, and the most likely that he would have either bought or traded for or read from somebody else. So if you guys think that that would be fun to watch as a live stream, leave me a comment or put it in the chat here, or let me know in some way. I'd appreciate that, because I am seriously thinking about doing that, because I think there's a lot that we can pull from the time period from those comics that will show you what it was like to be Elvis in 1944, 1945, 1946, during these formative years before he moves away to Memphis and begins the climb up the ladder to becoming the world famous entertainer that we all know. So that is actually everything that I have prepared for today. We got through that much quicker than I actually thought we would. I think I got one more picture. Let me look. Yeah, I do. And so this is why I think that somebody had a camera there and they were snapping the pictures. They weren't snapshots. These were contrived pictures. Everybody got together and they stood, because the film was expensive. You didn't waste this. And they all looked to be in the same area to me, with the same house, or between the two houses, right? Like, because the houses are very similar in structure with the wood and the windows, and they're up on the bricks. And here we can see that Elvis is wearing virtually the exact same outfit again, and the exact same way, with his hair exactly the same. So again, I think this has to be the same day, some kind of family get together. Maybe this is Noah again with his camera. Don't know who took these pictures. But you can see Vernon there. You can see Gladys. Gladys looks like she's put on a little weight since the last picture we saw, which was, we believe, from the jail. And she was wearing a dress that looked like it was maybe a little too big for her. She looks like nobody's got a smile in the picture, right? So we don't know whether they're happy or they're not happy, but they look like they're doing fairly well. Elvis is wearing a nice set of clothes. I'm sure Gladys had something to do with that, with the sewing of those pieces. I'm doubting that they're store-bought clothes, but maybe they're hand-me-downs, and she's because they do look pretty big on Elvis, those pants, like he's going to grow into them. But maybe they got them big, or maybe she made them big so that he could. Vernon looks like he's doing pretty well. Got a nice jacket on. It kind of looks like maybe it's leather. I really can't tell. But he's got some Vernon hair up there that kind of reminds me of Elvis in later years. And Gladys looks like she's doing well. So, I think things are going well for him right here. And they're memorializing that in this picture. They probably got a copy for themselves to keep. And Terry's telling me cheers on another live stream. And Emma's also saying it's been a great one. And Carol is saying she's sure it's the same day too. I appreciate that, Carolyn. Makes me feel like I'm not crazy. Uh, and that Carolyn thinks it's common not to smile in the pictures back then. I think that is true too. And Carolyn thinks it'd be a great idea to go over some comic books. So if you guys would like some comic books, and you get to see what was the comic book plot, and they were pretty fun too. And Colleen saying that the channel's informative and that she loves it. Thanks so much, Colleen. So Colleen is saying that it's so sad that Gladys never looks happy. There are some happy pictures of her. We'll get to them at some point, but there's very few pictures from these early days. And that's kind of the thing with all the series I'm doing. It's hard in the beginning to get anything to really show, but as we move forward, there becomes a lot more material available. So that will be coming. But I am going to go ahead and let you guys go short on this one. We're not here about 10 minutes early today, but we will have another episode tomorrow. I think I'm probably going to flip back to the mystery of 1977 so we can continue to push forward on trying to solve that investigation. And then we will return to these documents probably a few episodes later. I'm kind of like going through a full thread and then flipping for another full thread, so that we get some time away from each one and everything stays fresh. And until I see you guys again next time, thank you so much, and you all keep taking care of business.